Hello everyone, Ciantier here, and welcome to the Monk part of my Guild Wars 1 skill review project. This will be an introduction where I talk a little bit about how the Monk works. So there's a couple of important things to go over, one of which is a mechanic that is predominantly a part of the Monk profession, which is maintained enchantments. So you can identify a maintained enchantment because they have the little retribution here is one. It has this icon that shows kind of a circle with a line, kind of an arrow in it. And what that does is when I use it, it applies it, and it gives me a little icon here. Now, this enchantment does not have a duration bar. It just lasts indefinitely. It says, while you maintain this enchantment, such and such stuff happens. And in this case, it reflects some of the damage I would take back. I also have one fewer pips of energy regeneration. If I do this, it ends the enchantment, I get my pip of regeneration back, and the enchantment goes away. So if I were to, for example, apply this to these various individuals over here. Now, these do have a certain range. I'll get into that in a moment. I don't have any energy regeneration anymore, and if I apply it again, it will begin to have negative energy regeneration. So I will slowly lose energy. And once my energy hits 0, which will happen in just a moment here, this Master of Winds is very determined to keep me enchanted with Windborne Speed. But once that hits 0, I can no longer pay the upkeep cost for the enchantment because that -1 energy regeneration icon on it means that it costs an energy regeneration to do, or it costs an energy to maintain, basically 1 energy every 3 seconds. And so when that's gone, I drop that one. Now, I do have the other one still, because I'm still able to pay their cost. That's just kind of how it works. Now, if I get far enough away from those, I believe these will end. I'm not quite sure what the range on them is. Yep, right there, from distance. So once you go far enough, it will drop those. Now I have all my energy regenerating. So that's the major sort of unique mechanic skill-wise that monks have. Now, it should be noted that they do have some damaging skills. Those skills usually deal holy damage. Now, against something like this, holy damage is just going to be armor ignoring, so it's going to do the 52 damage. It's kind of printed on the front. There's some additional text there. But the other thing that's notable about holy damage is, and I don't know if there's anything around here to demonstrate this, but if something is an undead source, or is an undead entity, like a skeleton or whatever. There's a number of things that qualify as undead. Holy damage deals double damage to things that are undead. So like necromancer minions, for example, would qualify. So they would take double damage from that. There's a couple of other things to mention. So monks are predominantly a healing profession. They have a lot of healing skills. So Blessed Light is an example of this. It heals me for an amount. Now you see a 42 popped up there as well as the 123. And that 42 comes from Divine Favor. So Divine Favor is the primary attribute of the monk, and it reads, for each rank of Divine Favor, allies are healed for 3.2 whenever you cast monk spells on them. Several monk skills, especially skills related to energy gain, blah, blah, blah. There's some additional types of skills in Divine Favor. But anytime I cast a spell that targets an ally, they get healed if it's a monk spell. So, for example, if I cast Reversal of Damage on myself, this is an enchantment. It's an enchantment spell. It heals. Now, this is a signet. It is a healing signet called Signet of Devotion. I do not get the bonus healing from that because it is not a spell. So just important to understand how that works. It only works with monk spells as well. It will not add additional healing. For example, if I'm casting Blood Ritual on an ally, which is a necromancer enchantment, it would not heal with that. So those are some of the kind of mechanical things. I'll go over the attributes in just a moment. So like I said, lots of healing that can heal allies. It is important to note that sometimes you have the target other ally targeting restriction. That's just something to be aware of. I cannot heal myself with a spell that requires me to target another ally. I would have to target another ally. That's pretty straightforward, but it's worth mentioning. And then there was something else I wanted to mention too. Yes, you get a lot of condition and hex removal as well in Monk, just as a way of doing that. But a lot of it's healing stuff. So we have healing prayers, which it's as it says, has no inherent effect, but it is one of your attribute lines that has predominantly skills that raise health bars. It's about healing. There is some very clunky enchantment and hex removal in it. Some less clunky. Cure Hex is, for example, a straightforward hex removal. But for the most part, this is stuff that makes health bars go up. Some of it better than others, and we'll get to that later. Another mechanic actually that's very prevalent among monks have the most of it is resurrection skills. So, for example, Restore Life resurrects a party member. So you're going to find a bunch of resurrection spells. Actually, they have the resurrect spell. So that's another mechanic that you'll encounter a lot here is resurrects. I don't think any of the professions we've covered up to this point have had one. There are a few in a couple of other professions, and there's there's Resurrection Signet, which I'm planning on talking about much later, but this is a profession agnostic skill. It's going to be bundled up with the PvE only skills, although it's not that I'm going to do at the end, but it can be used regardless of your profession, and this is a resurrection skill. Let's see. So, right, so healing prayers is all about healing allies. It's about making health bars go up. A lot of the heals are kind of designed with the idea that divine favor is a part of them in mind. So it's something important to remember that becoming a secondary monk does mean that any of the heals that you would use are noticeably weaker. So right now, this much divine favor, the 13 divine favor that I have, I'm getting an additional 42 health off of this. That wouldn't be included. So this spell that's healing for 96 would just heal for 96, but as a monk, I'm getting like 138 healing out of it. So that's roughly, half again is good. So that's an important consideration with a lot of the healing prayers. That's why a lot of the, once factions was released, like necromancers and stuff, if they were going to dip into a secondary profession to do healing, would actually go towards ritualists, because ritualist skills are balanced around not having divine favor, whereas monk ones are. So important to keep in mind. Then there's smiting prayers. Again, it has no inherent effect. This is an offensive line. There's quite a few signets in here, actually. Quite a few offensive signets. So it's worth noting that this is kind of like divided into a few different broad categories. There's the directly offensive ones, so like Banish, for example, which absolutely wrecks minions, because it does... We'll talk about it when we get to Smiting Prayers, but it does a lot of damage to minions. But anyway, there's those. There's the enchantments that you place on your allies that are offensively oriented, like Balthazar's Aura, that makes the ally deal damage around them. Or retributive ones like Holy Wrath or the reversal of damage. And then there's kind of like the Punisher hexes. There's a couple of those, the Scourge hexes. Smiting Prayers in general is not great. The balance idea with it, with ArenaNet's balancing of it, was that they didn't want the defensively strongest profession to have offensive capabilities. I don't know why they introduced Smiting Prayers in that case, or at least in the way that they did it. If they didn't want it to have offensive capabilities, they should have approached it differently, in my personal opinion. Fun fact, Healing Prayers, Divine Favor, and Protection Prayers are all following the goddess Duena, whereas Smiting Prayers follows the god Balthazar, who is the god of war. Monks, of course, being very overtly religious characters. Although, if you look at all of the professions, they actually all follow a deity, particularly all of them do. The original 6 are very clear about this. Warriors follow Balthazar. Rangers follow Melandru. This was before Cormier, as it were. Mesmers follow Lissa. Monks predominantly follow Duena. Necromancers follow Grenth. And then the Elementalist, Energy Storage follows Lissa, Water Magic follows Grenth, Earth magic follows Melandru, fire magic follows Balthazar, and air magic follows Dwayna. So just kind of some interesting stuff going on with that, which I think is a kind of a cool world building thing, if a bit of an aside. But anyway, Smiting Prayers is kind of a mixed bag. There's enough skills in there to make a fairly powerful build with some other stuff going on, but overall it generally is pretty weak because they didn't want to make it particularly strong. Then we have Protection Prayers. Protection Prayers are kind of the opposite side of Healing Prayers. So there's basically two ways of making your allies survive. One of them is to restore lost health, which is what Healing Prayers focuses on. The other is to stop them from losing health, which is what Protection Prayers focuses on. So if you look in Protection Prayers, this is where you have the bulk of your condition removal. Hex removal is kind of spread throughout, but condition removal is concentrated in Protection Prayers. So you have things like Mend Condition, Mend Ailment, Mending Touch. These are all condition removal skills. And you have a lot of things here to reduce damage, such as Protective Spirit, which caps the amount of damage you take. Shielding Hands just directly reduces the damage you take, things like that. So that's kind of what Protection Prayers is about. It's generally very bad at directly healing, although skills like Mending Touch will heal conditionally. So you do have a little bit of conditional healing, but for the most part, it doesn't really heal. It just stops damage from happening. Or it can heal off of stopping damage. So, for example, Reversal of Fortune heals from damage. So that's kind of what Protection Prayers is all about. And then we have Divine Favor, which, as I mentioned earlier, it gives you that additional healing. So if you have 10 Divine Favor, you get an additional 32 healing off of it, for an example. It has a lot of quirky type stuff. So there's a lot of maintained enchantments here. So, for example, Divine Boon is maintained, Blessed Aura is maintained, Watchful Spirit is maintained, Unyielding Aura is maintained, and then just some other like stuff that shows up in here. We'll talk about it. It's not particularly focused. It does tend to err a little bit more towards the Healy or making you more effective at your healing tasks, stuff like that. Or effects that they didn't want other professions to have easy access to, such as Spellbreaker. So that's kind of what Monk is about attribute-wise. Of course, as a caster, it has the standard stuff, staves, scepters, and foci based on their various attributes. And then the +5 energy on the chest and arms, and the +1 regen on the pants and feet. Now, I have started talking about runes, which I really should have done for some of the previous ones, or insignia, excuse me. I glossed over that. For the most part, insignia are like nice little bonuses, but it doesn't hurt to kind of quickly discuss them just because there's only a couple. There's Wanderers that gives you additional armor against elemental damage, just a little bit. That's nice, but this one, Disciples, gives you +15 armor while affected by a condition. In general, I don't like these sorts of conditional insignia that are like plus a thing while affected by a negative state. Very similar to the Necromancer's +20 while affected by a hex spell. I don't want those situations on me. I want to get rid of them, so they're just not really worth much. The Anchorite's insignia gives you 5 additional armor for each recharging skill. Fun fact, the Mesmer has the exact same thing as Prodigy, but it's +5 armor with 1, 3, or 5 recharging skills. You'll notice that the Mesmer one is worth 2.3k, and the Monk version, again, the exact same thing, but it goes in Monk armor, is worth 130 gold, so it is substantially cheaper. That's just kind of what those do. So we will launch into it next time, starting with Divine Favor. So that will be exciting. I'm looking forward to going through Monk because there's a lot of important stuff to talk about. I should actually, before I jump in and end this episode while I'm thinking about it, touch on something that's really important about Monk, not from a mechanical standpoint, but from how it plays, which is that you have a very, very tight energy pool. Monks, more than other professions have to be on top of what they're doing, because if they're not, the team could crumble. If your Mesmer, for example, has to wait an additional 3 seconds for getting enough energy, getting an additional 1 point of energy to be able to cast their spell or whatever, or they have to stand there and wand things, just auto-attacking for, 6 or 12 seconds, it's not the biggest deal. Like, it might have an impact, but for the most part, it's just like, okay, yeah, they're just waiting there. It's not a huge deal. Monk, that could be a difference between a party member going down or not. And so one of the things that you'll notice with Monk is, for example, this skill here, Healing Burst, has 4-second recharge. That 4-second recharge can feel very, very long. So the other thing about this, though, is because of how active monks have to be in casting their spells, their energy pool is very stressed. They have a lot of strain placed on their energy. So most of the time, if a skill costs more than 5 energy, so if it's 10, 15, or 25, it's too expensive to really consider using. It has to do a lot to really be worth that much. So that's one of the things that we're going to see as a big consideration here, is very spells that are more than 5 energy have to be pulling a lot of weight to really be able to get onto a bar for me, just because monk energy is so tight, and you find yourself having to so carefully maintain your energy, so that way you can keep the party alive. So I just wanted to mention that as kind of a technical play thing, and something that deeply affects monk, more so than other professions, just because monk tends to be the healing profession. Other professions like ritualist can do it. Dervish can kind of dabble in it. Paragon kind of can partially do it. A lot of professions can kind of like support in different ways, but monk specializes in healing and protection. That is what it is good for. And it's such a critical job that your energy is under heavy strain. So it makes it very difficult to use expensive spells, any spell above 5. So that's going to be a big factor in sort of how I evaluate certain skills. Monk, more than other professions, really wishes there was like an energy cost of 7, to be clear of what I was trying to say there, or about to say there. There are certain skills that would definitely be too strong at 5, but are way too overpriced at 10, and I would never consider bringing them on a monk, just because they don't do enough for that amount of energy for what a monk needs. So that has a huge impact on things. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode here, and like I said, Divine Favor will be next. So until then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.